Hands up if you remember your school assemblies. How could you ever forget? On Songs of Praise this week, we discover how important assemblies still are in introducing young people to faith and in keeping the stories of Jesus alive.
It makes me feel happy because we learn new songs and we have fun.
I think the school assemblies set you up for the day.
I really don't like the fact that we have to sit on the floor.
I think they're a bit boring.
It's quite good fun to sing every morning, although I'm not very good.
This week, we trace the history of the school assembly and find out how pupils have learned to sing God's praises through the centuries. And our school choirs of the year perform some assembly classics. The religious school assembly has been a unique part of our education system for centuries. In 1870, when the government set up its provision for education, it set down in law that every school must have a daily act of collective worship. So the tradition of the Christian School Assembly for All was born.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name.
This is still the law today, 140 years later.
Even for the kingdom.
This week we've come to the Church of Christ the Cornerstone in Milton Keynes for our own celebration of school assemblies. Children have come from all over the area to sing hymns of praise that might have been written for different generations but have all become assembly favourites, like this first one based on Psalm 23. So if all schools are legally obliged to hold a daily act of worship, where does this requirement come from? Well, the answer partly lies with one man who worshipped here at St John at Hackney Church, successful businessman Joshua Watson.
It was the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, so he saw all sorts of children going in to have to work in factories and heard all those sorts of stories going on. And he really felt inclined to do something about it.
So he persuaded the Church of England to set up an organisation entirely devoted to the education of the poor, called the National Society. Its impact was dramatic.
So they're encouraged through grants of getting local clergy to start schools in their own parishes, some of which were in people's front rooms, some of which had in purpose-built buildings, some of which, a majority of which, were actually in the church buildings themselves.
By the time of his death, 44 years later, the National Society had set up over 17,000 schools.
His faith was, yes, in Jesus, but primarily his faith was in the church and the impact that the Church of England can make in the heart of any community. And of course, this National Society, when it was set up to root them in the practice and in the teaching of the Church of England.
So before children were taught anything else, they had to learn to be good Christians. When the state established its provision of public education in 1870, it took as its template the system set up by the Church of England. So there was never any question that religious worship would be part of school life.
And that template remains, with collective worship still at the heart of the school curriculum. It's 200 years since the National Society began, and the Church of England is celebrating its achievements and remembering the man with whom it all began.
Well, I feel as if I'm getting to know Joshua quite well, really, particularly this year of the 200th anniversary of the National Society. And in the Diocese of London, we've got a special candle that's making its way to every single church school right across the capital, giving thanks for the life of Joshua Watson, because he's enabled people to really excel and become those true people that God's called them to be. And I think it's because of Joshua that we've got places like St Mary's School, and we've got places like... His vision was about creating good quality, free education for every child in this country, and that's what we've got. His legacy is all around us.
Years ago, modern technology hit the school assembly.
Hello. What a splendid opening for our service. That was a song of praise to God, adapted from a tune by Mozart.
When the BBC launched their radio programme for school assemblies, no one really knew just how successful it would be.
In fact, at its height, it's thought that around half of the primary schools across the country were tuning in to listen to the programme. And two of the men involved with the series were Jeff, the producer, and Douglas, who did the music. So what was actually in these Service for School programmes?
Well, as with all good assemblies, a story, a song, a time of reflection and prayer. But one of the things that schools valued was we were bringing top artists and musicians, writers, storytellers into their classrooms and assembly halls.
Now it's time for you to meet our special guest. It's Johnny Morris.
Hello, and I must say it's very nice to be in Winchester.
At the request of teachers, Jeff and Douglas compiled a hymn book to accompany the series. It brought lots of new songs into the school assembly hall.
Had a most unusual...
There's a song from The Tiny Ant, which is almost like a musical song, but also embodies something new, which is a chance to sing a phrase and repeat it by another section. This one goes, from the tiny ant, from the tiny ant, to the elephant, to the elephant. And those about animals which children love. It really is a hymn, or a song if you like, all about looking after. And who's going to look after? You and me. It's up to us.
And some songs were more reflective.
It's all very well writing bouncy ones, but I love it when children get together and they think, hey, this is a great song, nice and smooth and quiet and meaningful.
I mean, that particular one, Spirit of Peace, reminds me of an incident during the Falklands War when a school in Aldershot wrote to us. A number of the parents were engaged in that conflict, and that particular song was one that they felt encouraged the children, gave them strength, gave them a sense of safety in the midst of their anxiety. And that's been one of the moving things about the response to Come and Praise, that they have touched the lives of so many children at very key points. And we hope, I hope as a Christian too, that they will have grown into their own spiritual journeys.
And from the post-war wireless to today's digital podcasts, the radio programme is still on air. And the songs from Come and Praise are still being sung, including classics like Go Tell It on the Mountain.